Cool. Karabo, welcome to the show, my friend. I think I've known you for almost a decade now, right? We met at UCT. And for the people that don't know who Karabo is, I just want to know your story.
Okay.
Take me back from when you grew up, maybe let's say 95, 96, when you were born in Sebokeng.
Yeah.
What was your childhood like? So that people get context of who Karabo is and why you do the things that you do.
Okay. No. So I'll start from the beginning, 95, hopefully, if I can recall, or these are the stories at least I was told.
Yeah.
Karabo comes from Sebokeng, was born from Mposerobe, le Siadi Motinani, and unfortunately Mposerobe died a couple of years later.
Okay.
And I'll tell you why this is important that I mention that I come from these two people, right?
Okay.
So yeah, from Sebokeng, if you don't know Sebokeng, Ekvil Hees Tuchan, Memamatu, that is us in the Val, so closer to the Free State, but Gauteng side. Yeah, basically was born in Sebokeng. I went to primary in, not in Sebokeng, but in Three Rivers.
Okay.
And then I moved to boarding school in grade 7. And yeah, pretty much in grade 10, then I made another big move to Cape Town. And yeah, that has been the journey from a schooling perspective. Very family orientated, also a firm believer in Christ, God, the Holy Spirit. And I think the core of everything that I do stems and comes from that angle.
Okay.
So I think I'm a firm believer in faith that can move mountains, right?
Sure.
And so that speaks to what is, often what is visible to us is not necessarily the end destination. There's always something beyond the visible part, but it requires some form of trust in self, some form of faith as well. So in short, I'm just a kid from Sebokeng that dreams big and has faith in, the future.
Sure. Yeah. Maybe let's talk a bit about your primary school, right? Before we even dive into high school. What kind of a person were you? Or the stories that you hear, this was the person that I was.
So I think, so coming from a mom who believed firmly in education, like my mom sacrificed everything, right? For me to be able to go to, I guess, what was a good school that she didn't even afford at the time. But she believed that, I'd rather have water every day for my kid to have good education. So I went to Christian Academy, which is a private school, or was a private school in Three Rivers at the time. And they were teaching education system called PACES, ACES. So it's an American Christian education system where pretty much you don't have a teacher in front of you. You receive a book and you go through self-learning. But the idea is that you have targets that you set for yourself. So every week there's a supervisor that you submit your goals to. And then every Friday you'd come to the supervisor to review your goals with. So it's a self-paced education system. And then the only time there's monitoring is obviously through tests and then exams as well, which happens. But you don't have a teacher teaching, right? And that taught me the discipline of, being able to sit with myself, being able to say, I need to read, I need to, even from homework as well. You set your own homework, right?
Sure.
So you say, this is the homework that I need to do along this topic. You submit it to the supervisor signs it off. Tomorrow you need to show the supervisor that actually I did this goal. I can set myself 1 page, I can set myself 10 pages. So the pace I determine. So I can do a grade in 6 months if I want to, or I can do a grade in a year, right? And yeah, so the discipline of, just being able to stick to goals, being able to deliver around goals, was something that I was taught from that education system for the first 6 years.
Sure.
And that's just because, my mom heard about something and she believed, she didn't afford it, like, don't get anything, don't make that mistake. But she just had this belief that this kid belongs here. And if I can do that, I've done my part as a mom, right? Then I got to about grade 4. And yeah, there was an element in me that was now lazy. Like, I remember actually my gran and my mom coming to school, and they were asking them, "Why are you failing?" Right, and I could attribute my failing to, look, I'm not performing because I'm lazy. Like, and I thought it was a normal thing, right? I thought it was you're asking me a question and I need to give you an answer.
Sure.
Right? My answer is I'm lazy. I've never received a hiding of my life like that. Because to them, it's, how does a grade 4 kid say,
You're lazy.
"You're lazy"? Do you get what I mean? Like, what do you mean you're lazy? And I didn't understand the gravity of the situation. But through, I guess, corporal punishment, because that's the type of upbringing that I did have, it was also able to restructure me back to, I guess, the discipline and being able to be motivated towards, I guess, achieving. At the time, I didn't even understand, like achieving, like grades, percentages. For me, it was, hey, the school thing, chief, we must come here, we must perform, and we need to do whatever we need to do. So I think it's up until grade 7, right? My first boarding school.
Yeah.
So when I left the, Christian academy to go and now do, the normal education system, I was in grade 7. So when I got there in grade 7, I actually realized, actually there's things like top 10. There's things like top performer in a specific subject. And all of a sudden I'm getting this attention, right? You move from a school that had 10 people in a class to 30, 40 people in a class. And now everyone is like, but I'm struggling with this concept. And you're like, but this thing, I learned it in grade 4 already. And already you have the discipline, right? That you've built over, I guess, a period of 6 years, that when you get to a normal system, you know how to sit down and do your maths after school, right? Go and play soccer, come back, revise, practice. And only when I came into the normal system did I realize, actually, I am sort of a top performer. I actually can perform well, right? And that, I guess, cemented those years. Christian Academy also helped me in terms of, look, it's an advantage and it's a disadvantage, right? In the sense that, as the name suggests, it's Christian Academy, right? Every day we are reciting Bible verses. Every day we need to explain, how God, motivated us to achieve certain things. That reinforced certain principles, certain terms, or certain,
You can say values, no?
Yeah, values,
Sure.
right? A value system of what is wrong and what is right. Lying was, seen as the biggest of sins at that time, right? And you can imagine the transition for me. You come into from a space where littering was, literally the biggest thing, and now people are lying, and you're like, yo, guys, but shock to the system.
Yeah.
And so my primary years did two things for me. I think number one, it instilled or built a system of discipline and values, or system of discipline, and then the second one is a system of values that was just reinforced by the school.
Sure.
Because we understood that so you sort of have to walk this journey like Jesus Christ, or at least according to the principles that the Bible were preaching. And these principles were reinforced to us every single day, that this is what you do, this is what you don't do, this is how you do it, this is how you treat people, right? And you think that's when you put out love, that the world will give you back love as well, because that was how everything was cemented for me at the get-go. So I'd say a system of discipline and a system of values, right? And I think things for me, the other thing that actually got introduced in primary is dreaming. So I was introduced we had a computer class actually, where we used to just do things like typing, playing around, just like a computer lab. And one of the things that we had was, so we had access to the internet, right? Google, and we had access to encyclopedia. So one of my earliest searches was my dad. Just because I've heard a number of stories and I didn't know this person, right?
About him.
About him as
So
well.
he was already gone when you were in primary school?
Yeah, no, he was already gone. My dad died when I was 2.5.
2.5 years.
2.5 years.
And then maybe let's dive into that a bit, right?
Yeah.
Now you're in primary school, you're seeing everyone comes with a dad and a mom.
Yeah.
Or everyone speaks about that.
Yeah.
And when myself, my dad is still alive,
Yeah.
but he never played a role in my life, right?
Yeah, yeah.
I know him by pointing at him at the streets.
Yeah.
But he was never present. And I think that messed me up, especially when I got to UCT,
Yeah.
when I was struggling with self-identity.
Oh,
How
okay.
does then you knowing that, oh, my father was this person, and you having to research all of this, trying to get to know him,
Yeah.
how does that shape you as a person?
Sure.
What's going through your emotions then?
So, firstly, I must mention that I was blessed in terms of my mom understanding certain things.
Okay.
So the first problem I had in terms of my dad was when I realized that people have two parents, right? And when I came into conscious of that, I decided to actually go and find or create a father figure. So I came home and I said, no, actually, this person is my dad.
Okay.
Right. And I had to go through therapy in a sense. Therapy, my mom found me a therapist,
In primary?
in primary, like grade 1, grade 2. Because I had speech problems. So I had to go through a speech therapist. Just to orientate my speech and make sure that these English schools, they'll say because you don't pronounce tomato as tomato, you have a problem, so you must go and see a doctor. So I went to a doctor, and then I began this problem now of, oh, actually this person is my dad because he's here, right? He's every day, and I was forcefully doing it. Like, it wasn't even a thing of like my uncle is here, and like my uncle would be my dad, and I'd refer to him to dad, and I didn't understand that, there's a certain sort of process for someone to become a father. For me, no, that kid has his dad here. The person who watches sports on a Saturday, that's your dad. So if my uncle is there, that's my dad. If next week there's someone else, that's my dad, right? And my mom then found me a therapist to just take me through, the emotions. So there was a therapist actually in Saboke, funny enough, zone 14. So I went through therapy, and, obviously we went through the journey, and they sort of started seeing those problems of, okay, this person has a sort of an identity problem. He sees everyone with a mom and a dad, and he's trying to figure out, where's this person for me, right? And then that's when the conversation started about, okay, this is your dad. He passed on. He got shot. This is the story behind him, right? And those are my first sort of memories of my dad. Right now, when post therapy, we understand that my dad is dead. We've built now that okay, your dad is no longer around, but he was there, but he has passed. Right? What is passing? Someone who goes to the next life. So I guess grade 1, grade 2, that's when these things are happening, right? Now they tell me stories. Now, my first interactions of my stories with my dad happened to be someone who was quite successful. Had many flaws that I came to understand very late in life. But at that moment, my dad was a hero because of the stories that I was being told of my dad.
What did he do?
So my dad was the head of Kappa. So at the time, Kappa was the national
clothing
label. So they had the licensing of distribution. He also did something with Kinoko. They used to have Stir Maribo. So Stir Maribo was around. And remember, these are articles, right? These are articles that I'm reading on the internet, Mail and Guardian. These are stories that now my mom is telling me that, hey, this is the newspaper article that I'm keeping. So pretty much an economist, but at the same time a business leader. And obviously, think of it, these are the first, I guess, blacks that have gone through university. BEE finds them ready and ripe. So beneficiary of BEE in that note, but did well for himself, right? So if you think of personal friends of my dad. You're speaking about Sipho Maseko, of CEO of Telkom. Those are people that studied. They actually did a like an interview for us.
Sure.
Just telling us stories. That was 21 years after he died. So they were just telling us stories about him. Bongane Madondo, that's the author of. So yeah, like renowned author. I forgot the book.
Sure.
But we read it in school as well. So his stories were my first foundation of what success looks like. And I then was built, with the mindset that you have to beat that. That is your target. Do you get what I mean? Like, that is what you need to achieve.
So that was your unfair advantage, actually.
That was my unfair advantage.
Yeah.
That's where it started, right? So it started with looking for a dad, going to therapy, finding out that he's dead. Now, the impression or the stories that they're telling me are positive stories. They're not going to tell me that, hey, he had this problem,
Yeah.
They're like, no, this guy was really successful, studied, was doing his MBA at Wits now. He did a partnership with Stekiniko, which is called the Maribo, where they're bringing cinemas to, the townships.
Sure.
And at the same time, trying to create films around Africans so that Africans are not watching action films from China only, because the action films were the primary thing at the time. But what about African stories, right? So one of the pioneers of asking those questions as well. So yeah, that cements my relationship with my dad. It becomes a positive image of what is there to achieve, right? And I then start researching, and as I research, it cements, business as a thing, and I want to then become an entrepreneur.
Sure.
Then the next sort of role model that I built for myself is, well, there's a business person who's the richest or who's the best, right? Guess what Google gives you? At the time, it gives you Bill Gates, right? Because Microsoft is the biggest thing in the world at the time. And he's the richest person in the world at the time as well. So the most successful businessman would be then Bill Gates. But that starts with my dad, right? And trying to beat my dad, or at least the image that I have of my dad, leads me to, well, the next best thing to achieve is become a Bill Gates then. Where does that lead me and leave me? It leaves me with, how did this person become a billionaire, right? Tech, right? And those are my earliest foundation of business and just wanting to become, I guess, a business person. And my relationship with my dad then just became a target, a goal, a mentorship. And my unfair advantage, actually, I like that term. And then, I didn't realize that it was
a term.
Yeah.
Why did he get shot?
My dad got shot in 98. So, the conundrum around my dad is he died at 31.
Yeah.
Had four kids with 4 different women by age 31. So the success came with, and this is what I didn't know, right? My mom was not going to tell me. I knew that I had brothers and sisters, but I didn't know, the problem around having, kids with, 4 different women by age 31, 32. And what sort of, trauma do you leave with the ladies as well? So he died in 98, got shot in 98.
Was it a target or a mistake?
Target. He knew. I'd say he knew. He knew. And I don't think it was necessarily... I'd suggest that it's less of a target. It's most probably someone that they had a problem with. And as a result of having a problem with that person, maybe it got to a point where the person decided to act.
Do you think it was a business problem or it was a personal problem?
Definitely a personal one. I doubt a business one. Because again, if you think of it, it's 98, right? Those are the first BE people, execs that are coming in. The Motsipes are still being established. The Ramaphosas are still being established. everyone is still establishing, and opportunity is vast and not scarce, right? Especially for the educated, black few at the time. So from a business perspective, I don't think there's too much competition from the black community, because you're just coming into democracy. There's so much you can do, right? So I would say, while my dad was blessed from a business perspective, academic perspective, he had definitely his flaws in terms of social and relationships and discipline around relationships. Yeah, because I mean, me and you are approaching 31.
Yeah.
Soon, and we're not even close to that number.
Sure.
Right. Of four
With
four different women.
Yeah.
Right. And he was getting married to the fifth one.
Fifth person.
So
Sure.
So already you see, and
He had,
this is not to say, and this is not the image I grew up with, by
Sure.
the way, right? This
Yeah.
is the conscious as an adult saying,
As you grow up,
okay,
you
no,
get to
but
learn.
this image that I've built for myself is not necessarily that all that perfect, but this image actually helped me have goals. My earliest formation of goals was this image, right? So yeah, he died, to answer your question, he died in 98. Definitely, I think from a social-based relationship problem. And yeah, there are names there that
Yeah.
I wouldn't want to even touch.
Okay. And then finding all of this out, right?
Yeah.
Remember, you had built now a certain image, a successful entrepreneur,
Yeah.
maybe a millionaire by that time.
Yeah.
And then now you get to be a bit wiser.
Yeah.
You learn all of this. Does that then change your perspective of him?
From a business perspective, it doesn't.
Okay.
Right. And the reason why is, when I met his friends years later, right, and I met the guys that he was doing business with. And my dad was talking about gender-based problems before 98.
Okay.
Right. Speaking about them as a black man in a society that was very limited in that sense, because of we didn't allow people to be transgender as we do allow, but that was an open conversation that he was having at the time. So when I look at that and I'm like, I feel like one of the things that I take is, one, from learning and him being here, I would have learned so much. But I also don't know that I would have had a relationship with him if he was alive. Do you get,
Sure.
Because of all the other, problems of being a man that doesn't have, I guess, the family structure. So I think my image wasn't tainted because of, I understood that these are the things that come with the journey that I need to look out for. And I need to be able to say, these are not the things I want for myself. I don't want this for myself, right? I don't want 4 kids with 4 different women, but I want this success. But the success also comes with its own temptations, and I need to be aware, because at least I have a template, right? Someone else doesn't have a template. I have a template of what possibly can go wrong if you are not disciplined, if you are, all of these things. You can have everything, and it can still go wrong, right? So, and that's the thing that it left me with, but it didn't taint his image. It just made me think, maybe I appreciate the stories, and maybe it's a blessing that God gave me the stories and not the person, because maybe I would have experienced a different experience and tainted the perfect image that I would have. But it definitely did give me lessons.
I love what you said, the story and not the person.
Yeah.
Because I'm actually now struggling with, do I try and reach out again to my father?
Yeah.
And get to build the relationship? And also, for me, it's that thing of, I'm the only son from my mother's side and from my father's side, right?
Yeah.
I've got relationship with my sisters.
Yeah.
From both sides, it's fine. But then now, I just want to know, gore kgosi, mabogole wa Motswana
Yeah.
ke mang, you know. Maybe I should start doing research on the stories, and because he doesn't want to have that relationship, he's not even willing to sit and talk.
Yeah.
So maybe then the stories might give me some comfort and closure, because I myself went through a lot of therapy, and also growing up with a mother that's distant.
Yeah.
I think as I grow, I understand a bit better.
Yeah.
So maybe let's jump into that. Did your mother ever get another husband, or you just looked at mom being a single parent and taking care of you guys?
Yeah, so look, I think partners definitely.
Yeah.
I think, but she never got married. At one stage, they were looking, but it never happened, which I think is a blessing. I take it as a blessing because a son is always protective of his mom. I think
Sure.
that's
Are you
just
the only son?
I am the only son.
Okay.
To my mom, but to my dad, I'm the second son.
Okay. Do you have relationships with your brother?
Yeah, I do.
Okay.
I do. Yeah, I think our moms are phenomenal, I must say, across
Yeah.
the four.
Yeah.
Like, our moms are phenomenal. Like, I still say, like, any
you
one
know
of
all
them.
of them?
I know all of them.
Oh,
yeah, no,
interesting.
like, it's yeah, very interesting. And that's why I say to you, it's a blessing that I have the story, right, of the person and not the person, because I don't think certain things would have been possible if the person was still alive, and maybe they taint then the stories, right? Because you need to interact with the person to get the story, but this person is like, so my mom, never got married, and like, I guess we just became each other's lives in that sense. She became my
your first love.
my first love, and I became her first love. And I think also the family I grew up in was also very close knitted.
Okay.
Right. So my mom has 4 brothers. So in terms of fatherly figure, what to do, guidance in terms of
She
life,
had all of that.
I have 4 uncles, and my dad also has 3 brothers, 1 sister.
Okay.
So in terms of living fatherly figures, that was also existent. It was there. There are people that I could point to it and say, hey, this is, or ask, or have questions about, even outside of my mom's relationship. And that also plays, I think, a pivotal role. But I think, stepping back a bit, right, I understand where where you say it's very important to understand where we come from, and I'm also struggling with the same thing, right? It's do I change to my father's surname? Do I study my father's lineage? Do I, especially now because that I have a son, right, as well. So when I look at that, I'm feeling like, okay, if I don't do the right research, right, in terms of who I am, how then do I explain to this guy when he's my age and he's asking me, but who am I? And I'm like, hey, chief, I actually don't know, and I've never cared, right? And so that's why we have to have those stories and an understanding where we come from. Even if the people don't want to give it to us, it's fine. We just have to have it to be able to at least point the next generation in the right direction. And yes, it can be limited. Yes, it's different if the person wants to give it. But at the same time, it's important that we do that information and, just checking so that we can pass it down. Yeah.
And then in grade 10, you then moved to Cape Town. Why?
Yeah. So when I left my grade 7 school, the idea was always to move to Cape Town. So from grade 7 to grade 8, the high school that I wanted to go to is Cape Academy of Math, Science and Technology. Because in my head, there was this image, and my mom did a good thing of, painting images for me, right? And now in hindsight, I look at it, I'm like, but why was I so convinced that, the only place I could I'm looking for the word, sorry. be able to perform,
Sure.
right, is in Cape Town. It's because she painted this picture of there's a school in Cape Town. These guys do programming, they do maths, they have labs, and all the kids that go there are the smart kids, right? And in my head, it created an image of, there's no other high school. I want to see myself in Cape Academy of Math, Science and Technology because it's prestigious. So she created that image for me that this place is prestigious. But now Cape Academy starts in grade 10, right? So they didn't start in grade 8. So in grade 8, I went to Boys High. I went to Boys High and I figured, this thing. But Boys High plays a very critical role because Boys High is where I come into learning what a career is, right?
Okay.
I've never been bad at maths. So I go to grade 8, I get the lowest mark for me was 73 that year. 73, and this is the lowest mark of my life, period, right? This lady that is teaching us, funny enough, her name is Miss Johnson, right? So every time I sing, I'm sorry, Miss Jackson, just to replace it with her. I replace it with her. So University of Northwest, so I went to Potchefstroom Boys High in Potch in grade 8. So first term I get 73. Northwest University comes to the school to showcase actuarial science to the top students of the grade, right? So they pick of each grade basically to come and introduce them to this career. If you know maths, that's where you go, right? And I'm thinking, but why am I not selected? Because I know 73 is not the end. This is just the beginning. So I asked Miss Jackson, hey, ma'am, may I please go to this exhibition, right? Because I don't think this mark is a reflection of what I can achieve, right? And she's like, no, actuarial science is for specific kids that get specific marks, right? And you didn't get that mark. And that's how I came to, that's the first time I heard of the word actuarial science. That's the first time I told myself that this is where I'm going. It didn't even matter what is it about, what's happening. This one said to me, this thing is not possible.
Yeah.
Right? And because she said to me it's not possible, I'm going to show her that it's possible. Right? I'm going to go and study this thing. See?
So you were doing it in a way to prove her wrong.
To prove her wrong.
Because I remember I also have a story which it was weird coming from an LO teacher.
Yeah.
Right? Yes, I didn't really have a proper solid foundational family structure and whatnot.
Yeah.
But ironically, I was always the number one kid at school from grade 7 all the way to grade 12.
Yeah.
Right? And in grade 12, my LO teacher fails me, go LO, saying that I'm not going to UCT, I'm not going to get into UCT.
Yeah.
Instead of giving me my distinction, she gives me, I think, a 76, knowing that the actuarial science class, they want an 80% in LO. And when I got to UCT, my first year I did BCom accounting because I couldn't qualify. But then I changed the courses around. Instead of doing your MEM 1010, did the MEM 1000. That's 1006. Why? Because I knew where I wanted to go. But then I think all I could hear was, you're not good enough and you're not going to do that thing. So I wanted to prove that person wrong. Which is crazy. Do you think you still have that right now?
Look, I mean, the perspective now is very different. But I think it was important. That thing was very essential for me, right?
Exactly,
Because it created a drive that was very different. It said, even when I left, Potch Boys, now I knew that, Chief, for you to do actuarial science, you must do what?
Maths.
You must do maths, right?
Yeah.
And you must perform, right? You must be a performer, Chief. You can't be an average performer. So I leave grade 8 and I go to Hoër School, Riviera. So I moved back home just before I moved Cape Town because I'm like, Mom, look, I'm moving far. So let me just come home for 1 year. be close, and then the following year moving to Cape Town. So I moved to her school, and this thing has created a image of this is where you need to be, right? Yes, it came from you got rejected, but if you're going to prove this person wrong, this is where you have to perform, right? And also remember that image that my mom drew of Cape Academy accepts students based off of marks. You have to have a 70 for maths and I think English, so 70 and above for maths and English. So now I'm also trying to qualify. I'm in grade 9. I'm trying to prove who? Miss Jackson wrong. I'm trying to also qualify for Cape Academy to be part of this prestigious group of, sort of individuals and people. Fast forward, the following year I get into Cape Academy, I get accepted, right? Cape Academy for me was, how they say your environment is important? That was Cape Academy. I met Klabiso at Cape Academy. I met Roger at Cape Academy. I met Zach at Cape Academy. I met there's people that went to Harvard at Cape Academy, right? So I became the average of my environment at Cape Academy, if that makes sense. And it just further proved that this thing was possible, right? Yes, it started as, trying to prove a point to, over time, it sort of just become, because I was in the right place at the right time, it becoming more of a reality, of saying, oh, no, this thing is doable, right? Fast forward, end of matric, I qualify, and I do qualify for actuarial science, except at UCT, right? Because I had, unfortunately for me, I was doing Afrikaans.
Yeah.
And so UCT requires, a certain average for you to, that basically there's a base minimum in terms of averages for you to qualify for actuarial science. So at VETS, I qualify straight up, right? Because you have a distinction for maths, physics, English, home language. UCT factors what? Afrikaans.
Now, that average for languages,
Yeah, so Afrikaans for me is like, hey,
Bloemfontein.
If you give me 50, I'm
You're
good,
fine,
and we can move. Now, in hindsight, I regret it. I think I should actually have pushed myself to do well in Afrikaans, because it also would have taught me some form of discipline, but also being able to interact with a group that I hadn't interacted with previously, right? Which in South Africa's case is a very essential group if you want to get into business.
Sure.
So, language makes people comfortable, and the better you are at languages, the better you are at making people comfortable, right, around the stories that you're telling and the products that you want to sell as well. So in hindsight, I would have wished I performed well in Afrikaans, but I didn't, and that's why then I didn't qualify for actuarial science, but I qualified for data analytics. At the time, and now I don't even know what data analytics is as well, right? It's a new field. It just gets complex.
Yeah.
So that's my relationship with actuarial science. It was formulated by that, and I was trying to prove a point. And would I do the same thing now? Heavily no. I would have investigated. I think I'm a natural at accounting, and maybe if I had invested more time trying to build a career in accounting, I would have most probably been one of the best. I still believe actually I can be one of the best, or in finance even. But actually, I was so obsessed with proving someone wrong. Someone wrong that doesn't even know my name today.
Fair enough. Actually, let's jump into careers, because I don't think UCT kind of shaped anything.
Yeah.
I think for me, UCT, the only thing I'm appreciative of was still being a top performer.
Okay.
And not going to class and using my time wisely.
Okay.
UCT, I made relationships. UCT, I learned sales.
Yeah.
By being a second year student in a Biba side class that doesn't go to class, but I'm at Samsung selling Samsung phones.
Yeah,
right?
true.
I get to interact with people. I get to travel all over Cape Town malls selling phones. So for me, UCT classrooms did nothing.
Yeah.
But the connections and the relationships I made, they were important. So let's talk about career.
Yeah.
I think it's the same question I asked you when we were driving. now was I haven't really seen you actively looking for jobs in corporate. And
Okay.
obviously, it's built from, or rather stems from, the father that you always wanted to beat the benchmark that he set,
Yeah.
right? And being an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
But why don't you want to work for someone? Let's start there.
I don't think it's not that I don't want to work for someone. I mean, I do work for someone now in Tapelo. I do work
Yeah.
for someone.
Yeah.
So it's not the principle is less of not wanting to work for someone, but more of what growth comes with working for someone, right? So if you think of it, let me put it this way. You are and this was my corporate experience, and maybe it's not for everyone, but
Sure.
this was my corporate experience. When I went into corporate, I realized that, okay, you could literally be building a button on a platform every single day of your life.
Say that again.
You could be building, so let's say this Facebook, you are building one button,
The like button.
the like button.
Okay.
Your focus is the like button, and you do very well at the like button, right?
I
Because
think I get what you're going
do you get
now.
what I mean?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
the amount of responsibility in a team of 1,000 developers that comes to Karabo, who comes from UCT, is most probably as big as one button,
Sure.
right? And then my question is, how much learning are you doing? Right? How much growth are you getting? Yes, you're getting compensated well, but in the long run, if we are to say, build a Facebook from scratch, would you be able to do it? You have the capability, you have the skill, right? But you've been given such a small task, right? That you're not
The
even
repetitive one.
a repetitive one at so, right? And a very linear, small. Very few people actually escape that small responsibility role by, I guess, climbing the corporate ladder, and the responsibility gets bigger, and it consumes you more, and you know. So from a responsibility perspective, I always thought corporate doesn't actually give you as much responsibility, and this differs from person to person. So I asked the question that if you're a junior actuary, right, for an insurance company, how many new models are you building? How many new models are you coming up with? Because there's a chief actuary who's done most of the models, so most of the time you are reusing his models.
Fair enough.
And how many times are they going to trust you with coming up with a new model? Right. So other spaces are obviously not like that. They're more innovative. They'll give you much more responsibility. But that was always my thinking. And hence, when I thought about working, I've always thought about consulting, right? Because consulting is going to give you that type of responsibility. It's going to expose you to, stretching yourself in terms of skills, using your creativeness as well, right? To come up with, problem solving for, execs of different corporates. Sure. So consulting would have been my ideal space. Unfortunately, I didn't get into consulting. But if there's ever a space that I want to get into, it would definitely be investment banking, consulting, business consulting, in that perspective. So those would be the two, I think, spaces that I'd play in. That's why I say I don't rule it out. It's just, for me, what am I going to be? If I'm spending 5 years at a place, what am I getting out of it, right? Now, if you bring it back as well, naturally, the thing that I've always been inclined to is business.
Yeah.
And so I was blessed in the sense that I got a scholarship that spoke to business.
The entrepreneurship.
Or entrepreneurship.
Alan Gray one.
That's the Alan Gray one, right? And that sort of also further just channeled me away from, trying to get into a corporate role, becoming better at a corporate role. I sort of then just figured, you know what, I have a bunch of ideas that I've been thinking about pitching here and there during university. Why not just try one, right? And spend time actually just trying to be part of the entrepreneurship ecosystem, working for different startups as well at the time, and seeing that, oh, okay, actually it is possible to start something from the ground up, and understand, how it impacts the person I'm servicing every day, how it's changing that person's life every day, right? That is possible, right? And so my life, I sort of found myself not necessarily found myself, but I'd say my journey played itself out in such a way that there was less dependence to try to get into corporate, but there was more, channels of this is how I can become an entrepreneur. And I'm not saying it's smooth. I'm not saying that there was always money or there is always money. Look, there are days where I'm broke on days and I'm like, yo, like I need a corporate job, or the comfort that at least comes, comes from that. But there will always be something, that is like, no, for 3 months, I'll give you this. You can do this, and then, you can survive as an entrepreneur. While you're doing this, do this, So that's how I deviated. I think I would call myself a victim of circumstance more than, not necessarily picking it. Maybe unconsciously I'm not picking corporate.
Yeah.
But yeah, entrepreneurship has just been a calling. I'll choose it every time. I think that's the thing for me.
Speaking of callings, another conversation we were having now, I think for you, I don't know if it was by luck or you prayed about this, but you met someone that changed your life at UCT, I would assume. And I think she's pretty much the only person I've ever seen you with throughout the UCT life, unless you were good at cheating. Lindy. Lindy comes into your life and you went out with Lindy to turn up. You did almost everything with Lindy. I remember your life revolved around Lindy a lot. And then you get out of UCT and you're still with Lindy and she's in corporate and you're an entrepreneur. Let's talk maybe firstly about Lindy, the kind of person that she is. Firstly, how then you and her forming that bond at UCT shaped who you are today as a father and probably husband to Lindy. To now you being an entrepreneur and she's a full-time corporate lady. And how does everything work when those days come in and you're broke and now you have to depend on her salary?
I'm blessed again. I think I'm gonna say that I'm blessed in the sense that yet again I'm a victim of circumstance, right?
Sure.
Lindy's dad is previously an entrepreneur, right?
Interesting.
So she has her exposure in that sense to an entrepreneur. And then she says to herself, I don't want to go through the challenges that my dad went through, right? And so corporate for me is the way, right? But understands the nature of entrepreneurship because she has been exposed to it firsthand.
Sure.
And so it's not a difficult sell that you're giving, right? So that's just from an entrepreneurship perspective, is that I'm already dealing with someone who has been exposed to this thing, right? Around the emotions, the up and downs, the roller coaster. Does she always want it? No, I can definitely say definitely no. Does she prefer someone who's in a corporate job? Yeah, right? But she has come to appreciate that this is who I am, and the best thing about being with a person is you need to give them the freedom to excel. So, or to excel at what they want to excel at, right? And also be practical as well, right? Like if I have a job, now that we have a kid, right? And I need to put food on the table, and I see that, hey, but I've tried this idea, it's not working. Maybe the job makes sense, right? And being able to evaluate it and being able to be open with the conversation as well, to say, okay, maybe I'm thinking I'm not going to take the job because of I'm seeing 1, 2, 3 this side that might happen in 3 months. Yeah, you might not like this decision now, but you might see the results of me making a decision, but having that conversation and being honest around it is one aspect, right? Now, it's funny how I actually met Lindy, right? We come from the same place. Yeah?
Koval.
Koval. Yeah, we come
Okay.
from like literally a block away from each other.
Oh.
But we had never met. So I first met, the time I met Tapelo is the first time I met Lindy in grade 11. So we went on an excursion to Tapelo School, go Rustenburg.
Sure.
The chief school, I think, Lebone.
Lebone,
Yeah, Lebone College. So Lindy came from her school, I came from my school, and there was like a conference there that was
smart
happening.
learners.
Yeah, pretty much.
Sure.
So that's the first time I saw Lindy, and in my head I'm like, yo, this lady, I like her, right? I'm like,
In grade 11?
In grade 11.
Sure.
But I never get, the oomph to be like, hey, let's have a conversation or anything. So I don't see her again for what, grade 12? Then I see her again in first year.
You were in the same class, no?
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember Lindy was in our class.
Yeah, so
Sure.
I met her, the first time I met Lindy, it was when you met Lindy.
At UCT.
At UCT. That's the first time I had a conversation with her. And then we figured, so much of our lives are aligned. And I think we only started dating late in first year. Very late in first year. Like, people thought we were dating at that time.
Was it first year or second year?
First year. But
Is it?
Yeah, very
okay,
late.
probably around maybe
Very
October
late.
exams.
Yeah, very late.
Okay.
Very late. Yeah, because the earlier... Yeah, because the first met around maybe April. And it went through, maybe October, you're right.
Sure.
And yeah, that's when maybe we officiated and like, anyway, we're spending so much time together, we might as well, be together. And because we also, at the time, our goals were aligned, right? We were both trying to get into, she's doing actuarial science, I'm doing data analytics, our subjects are pretty much the same.
Yeah.
So I'm seeing you in every class that I'm going to, right? And our routines as well. It makes sense that you have, we study together, we attend classes together, we review work together. And then, the bond just grew from strength to strength, ended up finishing varsity together. And we've been at it. I think that the one of the things that I'd say now we're looking at marriage. That's the conversation. That's the stage. We have a son together, a very lovely son together. And like the future for me with her in terms of entrepreneurship has always been around being as transparent as possible about the lows, being as transparent as possible about the highs, and trying to walk the journey with her, in terms of where are we going, what are we trying to achieve, and being able to understand that are we on the same page at that time or moment in time, if that makes sense.
Sure.
Yeah.
Decisions and making choices, right?
Yeah.
Why Lindy out of so many other people? What attracted you and made that definite decision to say it's Lindy and nothing else?
Look, for me, it's the type of person, right, that Lindy is. Firstly, me and her have a great relationship, right, from a friendship.
Friendship, yeah, I loved it.
So that's number one.
Sure.
Then you have to look at the fact that does the person I am with, right, have at the core same beliefs as me. So when we talk about, I guess, values, in terms of determining what is right and what is wrong, right, can we use the same process or method to come into a conclusion of what is right and what is wrong? At the time, obviously, that's not a part of attraction. I think at the time it was just like our synergy.
Sure.
Right? Lindy's beautiful. We're just synergized. Right? We're just at the core. I believe this is my soulmate. Right. This is my person that I've found, and she has a good understanding of me, and I have a good understanding of her. And as such, I love to be around her, right? And this is a person that I'd love to spend my life with. I think it just makes natural sense because of the attributes of, even when we fight, this is the person that I'd like to fight with, because she understands me and I understand her. And yeah, so at the beginning, I think it was more of we connect,
More than anything.
more than anything.
Sure.
We connect and we are friends.
Okay. And then, startup wise,
Yeah.
did you ever have a business that failed?
Yeah, I did. I did.
Tell me a bit more about that. Just pick one.
So one, the first one that I'll start is, so we realized that, so a lot of kids, when they graduate, so on the graduation day, they need multiple services, right? Especially out of town, students. So if you think of the graduation ceremony, you need a gown, you need an outfit, you need, if you're out of town, you'd need flights, you need accommodation, you need transport in the city, because your family most probably is coming into the city for the first time. Well, that's if your parents are not rich, but if your parents are rich, then you're sorted.
Fine, yeah.
So we thought, why not build a graduation, builder, sort of like a package builder that gives you all of these services at a discounted rate, and tries to push volumes towards certain vendors so that students can get discounted rates, all right, for on dresses, clothes, suits, gowns, accommodation, transport, and restaurants. Because after your graduation ceremony, most of us gravitate towards some form of a restaurant or something,
yeah.
right? So why not just create a platform where one can select a few things, build a package, and get it cheaper than because of the volumes that we'd be pushing to the vendor. From a restaurant perspective, I think it made sense because it's a question of how do you direct traffic towards a specific restaurant. So it made sense because what you want is if that week of graduation ceremonies, I could have more, let's say 100 families coming to my restaurant because I'm giving them a special offer or graduation offer. So from that perspective, it made sense, right? But from the other sort of services, it didn't make sense if you think of it, because there's a vast range of vendors that one wants to pick clothes from. You can't limit someone in terms of something that's as creative as clothing, right? People want to be as creative and not be limited, so it doesn't work in terms of clothing. In terms of flights and things like accommodation, gathering that, I actually got blocked on Airbnb for that because I was trying to garner the host. Yeah. So I was trying to basically create a list of hosts from Airbnb that we can negotiate rates on. So that for me was the first failure. So for two reasons. One, I don't think there was a consistent market. That was before COVID. Then COVID hit. There's no graduation ceremonies. So that whole model flies out because graduation ceremonies now are online, right? And at the same time, like the idea, we weren't sure that it was going to make money.
Okay.
Yeah, because I haven't even now I haven't told you how are we gonna make money in this
On
thing.
that thing, yeah. I was trying to figure that piece out.
So we didn't have a clear revenue model, not even a business model, but a revenue model, right? On how we're gonna generate money from that. So that was one of the first ideas I think that just flat out died. Then the second idea that I actually never got to was around building. And I think it's if also you don't start as well, things just don't.
Yeah,
they don't take off. So the second idea that I worked on was how we have cameras all over. So I realized that most major crimes in South Africa use a car.
Okay.
right? Whether be it a hijacking, there has to be another car. Whether be it a robbery, armed robbery, heist, there has to be a vehicle involved. Vehicles have to travel on dedicated things we call roads, right? And most of these roads have surveillance cameras
That are not working.
that, yeah, nine times out of 10 are not working.
Yeah.
But the idea was, if you could identify the cars, and at the time what I was saying is with Ubers, right? You could have a camera at the back and at the front, and basically the cameras are identifying cars where the license plate doesn't match, the color or the description of the car, right? And then you can flag that car and say, there's a car on the N1 South driving to Johannesburg that has this. This doesn't match this, right? And that was the idea of that, but it never materialized because also the database, you'd need a database that says number plate, car, description, all of that. So getting that data would come from where? Your license department.
Sure.
Right. And now what they're doing, like when they scan at your gate, that's them building a database of those things, right? But at the time, you'd have to go to license department to somehow
You wouldn't
integrate
find
it.
anything in it.
And yeah, so it would be very tricky to do that. Then I got to Achiever. Achiever.
The business now.
Yeah, the
Okay.
business now. And that's sort of also transitioning. But I'll explain that as well. So Achiever, what the base model of Achiever is, have you ever realized that, and you're in education, right?
Yeah.
What I realized is there are people with capability that aren't performing, right? And the major difference is, especially if you take people of, let's say, the same level of capability, né? I realized that sometimes there's a behavioral element to not performing, but no one identifies that behavioral problem, right? So if you think of a behavioral problem, what I mean through a behavioral problem is, if you have two kids, right? They are both capable. One does his homework every day. One doesn't. The only time you're going to see that this kid has a problem is at the end when you get the result. That, hey, this person didn't reinforce the work, as much as they were supposed to. And unfortunately, by then it's too late. Now, the natural course of things, and even when you tutor someone, right, you'll tutor them and say, go and do these questions. They come back next week, they haven't done those questions. They can't improve, right? So there must be some form of behavioral activity attached to performance.
Sure.
And how do we measure that behavioral activity that's attached to performance? So effectively, where I wanted to get with Achiever is using behavior to predict outcomes. So using your daily behavior to try and predict roughly this is where you're going to be performing, right? Now, we know that, so you'd say that works for maybe getting a 60%, but beyond getting a 60%, there's no correlation between spending more time with work and getting an outcome, right? But what I was saying is, at least if you can identify how behavior affects performance.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Because I think that's pretty much what I'm trying to do as well with my analytics in Ulwazi. But okay, and that business is pushing.
So there we got a couple of clients, managed to run pilots.
Yeah.
At the beginning, and I think with education, this is what you were saying earlier. Which major company do you know in education?
Major company in education.
Startup.
That does what?
Anything.
Startup.
Yeah, startup in education. That has done very well.
Hey, you're looking at the likes of Curo, but educationally they're not teaching, so I wouldn't say they're doing well, right?
Okay.
So they're limited, but now there's a lot of private schools and all that.
Okay.
Yeah, so I don't know. I don't pay attention to them.
Curo is a good one.
Yeah?
But now Curo starts everything from the ground, right?
Sure.
So let's maybe look at a startup that has to penetrate the already existing education system.
I wouldn't even say ulwazi because we are not even recognized. I don't know. I don't really know which other startups are trying to do something as big as what you're trying to do in the education space.
So the thing about there are, right? I think there's definitely, we need to give credit as well. It's true. Like everyone is trying to
do something,
to make a dent into improving outcomes, educational outcomes. But the problem about the education system currently, in terms of allowing innovation, is that there's no clear process of how you introduce innovation within the DBE. Right? Like, you don't even know where to start in the DBE to introduce a behavioral tool, to introduce a tutoring solution, to introduce an analytics tool, right? Which department is looking at data and trying to analyze data and use predictive analytics to try and say, but if this kid is here in grade 1, this is where they're going to end up in grade 3. A lot of the departments, yes, are doing data on historical outcomes, not necessarily trying to use data to make the future better, right? And so the education system itself doesn't have a way of introducing innovation into it, right? That's why at best we are better off trying to either go to individual parents themselves, right? And trying to find a route through that manner, which is I guess a B2C model. Or going into the private school, market. That's the other market.
That's what we eat, to be quite honest.
Unfortunately, that's the reality, right? So the privileged get better and better and better and better, and we don't end up fixing the problems that we are intending to fix, at the beginning, because I don't think there's a clear way of integrating solutions into the school system in South Africa. And I think there needs to be some form of like a innovation hub or innovation leg of the DBE that is measured on, solutions that they bring, how much impact are solutions, and trying to bring in solutions where startups can say, I need to get into that hub for me to have access to, schools in Gauteng, or schools in the Eastern Cape, or schools in Limpopo. But now there's no clear definitions. You go to the Department of Education now, you can speak to 10 departments.
And
right?
Still no one will.
And still no one will say, Chief, this is my responsibility, or take it, right? And you understand, these people have day-to-day work that they have to worry about already. Now, taking on anything new is adding work to the very same workload that you have. And so that's why even in corporates, we have innovation hubs for that reason, right? So to free up space for people that need to introduce new solutions. So in education, that's what we did. We got a few clients. We did well. We got feedback. We ended up iterating the solution into events.
Okay.
So I realized that the gamification model that we were using in education works very well for events as well, right? And it was a hit, it was an instant hit. And I thought, we're gonna do well now. We're gonna find, basically it's just been a learning curve, and a very slow learning curve. But we're taking it a day at a time. Look, I don't think Achiever has failed, because I myself don't think it has been given enough of an opportunity for myself to say this thing has failed. Even an iteration on health, right? I'll give you, universities have student wellness centers, right? The student wellness centers are reactive at the moment.
Very much so.
Right? So you're either waiting to be sick, have a mental health, issue or problem, and then you go to see the therapist or psychologist on campus. But who's trying to make sure that students on campus live healthy, fit, active, proactively? Who's trying to get students to at least live a proactive, healthy life? I still say my first year of gaining weight, right, weight problems is with the meal voucher system. When the kitchens were closed.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now I was eating Steers,
everything.
KFC, McDonald's
Sure.
for a good 4 weeks. Right. And there was no alternative. Yeah, you could buy food at Pick and Pay, but I wasn't also fortunate because I'm living at Rochester. Right. So the options that I have around me were most probably the options that I'm eating as well. So what I'm trying to to just maybe cut a long story short is I don't think Achiever is dead. There's maybe other iterations of it that we still need to test and apply, and that's what I'm trying to catch up. So either is it in events, is it in the health space, is it in academics, is it so I think a behavioral rewards program can be beneficial in any of those spaces. Yeah.
And then maybe let's talk about how you fit in with Tapelo.
Oh, okay. No, so with Butlali at the moment, so I actually realized in retail that there's a lot of what Butlali is doing that can like benefit the retail space.
Sure.
And so I approached the team saying, hey guys, I think we can approach 1, 2, 3 clients on the basis that you guys have the solution, and I can join in as a partner there, trying to push these different solutions. And so we then worked on one client, and the next client became the next client, and then solutions iterated into other things as well that we are now trying to get into, like mining. But we'll announce as well as we go. So it was more of a sales that just became a relationship that grew into how can we formally partner with each other, I guess, going forward as well, and trying to just also understand the technologies that they are bringing. Like those guys are ahead. Like if I tell you how those guys have changed the game, I think we're only going to realize it maybe 10 years from now.
Yeah, no.
Like, they are ahead. Like, you have to think about, have you ever thought why Siri doesn't work well in South Africa? Why we don't actively use Siri as much? Why when you buy a Mercedes-Benz, it doesn't understand your accent when you say, hello, Mercedes, and it says, hey, what?
I think obviously it's the language, right? Our accent, how deep certain octaves may be, right? How loud or how soft. Because a lot of people have issues hearing me.
Yeah.
Because they say I'm very soft.
Yeah.
Right? So that's the main reason.
Yeah.
Right? Also, I speak English in a certain way.
Yeah.
We can all three of us come from Val.
Yeah.
But we speak differently.
Yeah.
Right? So Siri will be confused, obviously.
Yeah.
Because Siri was built for the Americans, not for us. So
Now,
I know they work a lot with language and trying to get a Setswana speaking person to do Siri in Setswana, hopefully.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I've seen some of the solution they're building. Like I said, I spent a lot of time with them at the Innovation City.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, those guys are pushing. Those
Yeah.
guys, and they're also a dream team, right?
Yeah.
Which is another, maybe the last 2 points that I wanted to chat about.
Okay.
It's relationships, not like love relationships,
Yeah.
like Lind and stuff, but look at how they built their team.
Okay.
All of those guys, they are friends.
Yeah,
Right?
yo.
And they're so tight.
Yeah.
And I love that about them, right?
Yeah.
And I also am building a team now, and I'm
Yeah.
finding the people that I actually relate to, whether it's church-wise, whether it's going out.
Yeah.
We kind of also enjoy doing the similar things. We've
Yeah.
got the same values and whatnot. Maybe, yes, you've mentioned it when you're talking about Lindy.
Yeah.
But looking at, let's say there's an entrepreneur somewhere
Yeah.
that wants to build a team. What would you say these are the things that could set you up for success, especially in a team building? Because a lot of startups, especially also in Joburg, because we don't have your innovation cities and stuff.
Yeah.
A lot of people fail because they work in silos.
Oh, okay.
Right? So partnerships, relationships, and teams. Let's maybe chat about that a bit.
Partnership, relationships, and teams for startups.
Yeah.
I'd say the biggest thing is being transparent. I think we downplay how important transparency is in relationship, teams, or anything, right?
Sure.
Transparency when it's tough, transparency when it's good, right? And being honest with each other. So transparency and trust, I think, at the core of it.
Okay.
Because when you have that, right, everyone is allowed to the freedom to do what they're good at, understanding that the other person will also play their part, right? But if you don't have this, you're going to have a problem, right? Like, just because you don't exist in a space that allows you to freely do what you need to do,
Sure.
right? And I think if you look at the team, like the Bohlali AI team, they have that core. At the core of them, they have transparency and trust, right? And yeah, I hope they'll come and share their story. Definitely.
Yeah, Tapelo is coming. Tapelo is coming. Yeah.
But what I want to say is that's the first principle, right? That most relationship teams, startup, founders are built around, right? And I would say that is more important than even having like similar principles, core values. Because if you have someone you trust and the same person also trusts you and you guys are transparent with each other, right? You could have different lifestyles, but because you trust that these, like around this thing, we have a similar, like you might have maybe one thing that attracts you to another person,
Sure,
and that's enough, right? So that's why I'm saying trust and transparency is the core. Even if you don't have other areas of your life, like do you go to church or do you run, for example, right? Botlali has to grow at some point.
Yeah.
There'll be people that are like, chief, he's a great dev,
yeah,
but he's never gonna run. Right? That doesn't mean he doesn't belong there, right? Maybe he's into music, right? And that's his maybe way of connecting to the team. And I think we need to find ways of connecting with other people, but at the center of everything, we need to reflect on how honest are we, right? Number one, and how transparent are we, and do the same with others as well. So how honest are they and how transparent are they, right? That makes me comfortable with being able to be present in this relationship, even if I'm a different person from you, right? Because a lot in the business world revolves around that.
your team. Yeah,
It revolves around your team.
Sure.
And if you don't have trust that they're doing the right thing, you're going to have, or transparency, you're going to have a problem. So, I think you are blessed if you wake up and you literally have, a team of individuals that love Chelsea. Like, these guys love Chelsea. I don't understand why, but
I'm a Chelsea fan.
I also don't understand why. Like, that's trauma for you guys. But you are blessed if your whole founding team is like your Chelsea. You all Chelsea fans.
We are losers.
Do you know what I mean? But yeah, I as an Arsenal fan, might
that's what we don't understand actually. No, Arsenal, no. Okay.
But so you're blessed if other aspects of your life match.
Yeah.
Right.
And outside the professional side.
Outside of the professional side.
Okay.
But the core of it is if you have this, right, and this also gets built over time. It's not unfortunately, this is not something that because we had a conversation, you can say, hey, Tapelo is transparent, Karabo is honest. No, right? It's a time will tell thing.
Sure.
And with time, people get more comfortable with the fact that, okay, this person is transparent and they're honest. And they tick that box, and everything else, I think, falls into place.
Cool. Alrighty. Maybe the last one would be looking ahead.
Looking ahead for
Where
me.
is Karabo going? Yeah. What can we expect in the next 3, 4, 5 years?
Definitely, let's say short term, working on joining, I guess, formally.
The team.
The team. So definitely, I guess structuring like a formal, I guess, partnership somewhere somehow into Buhlali. That would be like very near. But yeah, that we'll share the details, I think, of how that's going to happen, or what role or what's happening. But I think in one way or the other, might join the team. I'm very interested in what they're doing.
Sure.
And I also just think they have a product that's ready to sell. Like, and I love selling, so even if it's from that standpoint, I think it's going to be beneficial. So that's one. I'm not going to stop to becoming an entrepreneur myself, I think, but certain things might maybe take the backlog. But I definitely think the behavioral, tools that I've been building might take off, and I'm looking into how we can still make that. I'm investigating, talking to schools, sort of starting afresh, right, with a new blanket approach to say, okay, what part of the tools that we built are still useful, and maybe I can repurpose and use differently in a different setting, be it weddings. So yeah, I'm also looking at creating platforms to digitize people's weddings, and for them to have like a platform that they live on, for that wedding or for that event, that special event for someone, right? So we have the pieces of technology. It's just a question of how
do you plug
how
and
do they
play?
formulate. But to answer your question, in 5 years, I'm definitely a successful entrepreneur. I think I'm not doubtful about that. And I think success in both in terms of the impact that whatever I'm working on is, visible and measurable. But also that whatever we're working on is making money. Like, unfortunately, we can't avoid making money, right?
Sure.
So those would be the two measures. So impact
And money.
and money. And impact for me, I think, just to be specific there, it can never be animals. I don't think I'm an animal lover. I think humans suffer, or
Way more,
at
yeah.
least the black person suffers so much that we need to be intentional around making impact and improvements around the black person. And yeah, if I could make a dent, I think that's what I would want to be doing in the next 5 years, and at least being able to be compensated or making it sustainable in one way or the other. So
Okay.
yeah, that's me, and that's where I am in 5 years.
Sure. All right. Thanks, my friend. I think obviously I have contact with you. I'll keep in touch. I'll be able to see the story.
Yeah.
Maybe in 5 years' time.
Yeah,
we might
no,
have
no.
a different conversation, especially for our guests and everyone
Yeah,
else.
my future aspiration.
Yeah. Besides being an entrepreneur, maybe being more of a present father or
Who that like yeah, no. I think one thing is one thing I realized is that with a certain level of success, you free up more time. Right? And my indicator of my future aspiration is to free up as much time for my family as possible. I want to be able to wake up on a Monday and be able to take my kids to school,
sure.
take my wife to a coffee shop, and reflect. Take the Monday to reflect, and knowing that at the same time we are still generating some form of money, even if we're at the coffee shop. But take time to live, live our lives that's based around being with each other and being present for each other. So if I can free up enough time to just be able to be present from a family perspective, I think I would have achieved
Sure.
much of what I want.
That's actually crazy because that's exactly what I'm trying to do as well, right? I did say to you at the beginning of this that unfortunately my almost fiance left. But I think that's one of the things that are core to my heart now, working for my time back. And it has a lot of sacrifices that you need to do now,
Yeah.
so that obviously the kind of rewards
Of
are
it.
going to be evident very soon, right? So how would you manage that, or how are you managing that? Maybe that would be my question, especially, well, it's selfish because I actually want to learn how to manage that. I
Yeah.
don't have time for myself because of my businesses. I run 5 businesses, and when I knock off from my professional job, there's always something that I'm doing.
Yeah.
When I'm at prayer on Thursday with my prayer group, after that I get home at 9 p.m. I have something to do.
Yeah.
Obviously, luxury is I'm still alone right now.
Yeah.
But then when I have a family, I have a child, how would you then maybe...
So living with each other, and unfortunately, like I'm a big advocate of marriage.
Okay.
Right? And with that, I say, get married, do the right things.
Sure.
Right. And I think being able to be, be together in a specific space also helps.
Okay.
Right. And also with the understanding, I mean, you like someone also has to understand that you're gonna come home and maybe at first it's an hour, right? But you keep it measurable.
Sure.
Right. So firstly, get into the same space. So get married, have a stable home, then create measurables to say, oh, okay, you know what? This year, my commitment is at least an hour. I must be with my family.
Okay.
Right. And that's my measure. Right. At a minimum, I must just do an hour a day dedicated to my family.
It's just you, Lindy, and the child.
That's it. Right.
Okay.
And then if I'm doing better, right? So when I say better is that if I am making more money in the same time, I then need to be able to give more time to my family.
Okay.
Right? So I need to be able to take away from this activity and give back to what was not getting. Right? So these guys are getting 15 hours. You move it from 15 to 14, your family gets 2 now.
Sure.
Now okay, no, this thing is actually working because it's measurable. You are measuring, okay. And even Katlum, they start seeing that, okay, no, my dad is active with me for 2 hours now. We can play soccer for 2 hours, right? Then the next year, maybe it moves to 3 hours. Then eventually you'll get to a point where, you can do a weekend. You can do 5 hours. It's much more flexible, right? So keep things measurable and also try to do as much of the right thing as possible. Unfortunately, you can only also do the right thing with someone, you guys, when you align with someone as well. Like, let's also not take that for granted.
Sure.
Because another person is not going to understand that, right? They want you for 10 hours, Chief, and that's the reality of it. They want you for 10 hours.
Hey.
So it's a question of also alignment with the person and individual, and them understanding that it's a strategy, right? And the strategy needs to be communicated, it needs to be measured, it needs to be reflected on, and you need to be held accountable towards that.
Sure.
Yeah.
All right, Karabo.
Cheers.
Thank you so much, my friend, for coming through. I wish you all the best, and God willing, we shall be sitting here again in 5 years' time talking a different story.
Yeah, no, thank you so much.
No,
Cheers. Sharp, pitch. Oh, yeah.